Multi-step algebra equations. So these can come in all different sorts of varieties. I'm going to try to cover every variety that I know that normally appears on the GED. So there might be something that I miss, but the steps are still the same. So once you learn the steps, you can figure it out. So the first two I'm going to cover are multiple like terms that you need to combine. So having a variable like x in different places that you need to get together to make it into one term with a variable. And it can come in two different ways. So this is the first way it could appear, where both of the variables, x, they're both the same, so they're like terms. They're on the same side of the equation. So here's the equal sign, so they're already on the same side. If they're already on the same side, all you do is simply combine them. So since these are both positive, you would add them together. If you haven't watched the um, algebraic expressions lesson, you need to go back and watch that. This will make a lot more sense if you watch that first. And you definitely need to have covered the 1 and 2 step algebraic equations before you do this video. So 4x and 6x just combines together to make 10x. You bring your equals down and your 20, and then your last step would just be getting rid of the 10. So x would be 2. Now the other one is a little bit more involved, and it is like this. So you've got your equals here, you've got a variable here, 4x term, and then a term here, 10x, that are alike. So they're on opposite sides of the equal sign. So this is a little bit different. You can't just add them together. You've got to move one of them. Now, ultimately, the choice is yours, which one you move. But I'm going to tell you that from experience, I always move the smaller one to the bigger one. And if one's negative and one's positive, I always move the negative one to the positive one. And you'll see why once we do a few of these. So this is 4x, this is 10x. If I move this way, I'm going to end up with a negative. And the less negatives you have to deal with, the less chances you have of making mistakes. Sometimes you don't have a choice. In this case, we do. So I'm going to move the 4x to the 10x. Now you do this in the exact same way that you would move the minus 15. So you should have learned already that to move a minus 15, you just put plus 15. And that gets rid of it. Now normally we would just be getting rid of the 4, but this time we need to get rid of the 4 and the x. So you can't just simply divide by 4 like you normally do, because the x would be left behind. You have to do the opposite sign. So since this has no sign in front of it, it's assumed to be positive. So we just do minus 4x. So if that's positive, this is minus. If that's negative, this is plus. Copy it to your like term on the other side. Then you combine these like terms. So 10 minus 4 would be 6x. Bring down your positive 3. Bring down your equals. Now that should be gone, so you shouldn't bring down anything that's in that term right there. That's all gone. Don't forget to bring down your minus with your 15 so that it's negative 15. Now we're simply back to a two-step problem. So since your x is on this side, you're going to be getting rid of your 3. Now remember, punch this on your calculator, punch in negative 15 minus 3. Don't add anything that's there. I see a lot of people try to put negative 15 minus negative 3. That will give you the wrong answer. Since they have the same sign, we would add them together and keep the sign. And the last step is to get rid of the 6. So your answer is negative 3. I'm going to do 2 that I want you to try on your own. 7x minus 3x plus 5 equals 29. Eight x minus 4 equals 3x plus 26. So pause your video and do both of those. Even if you're not sure, just go ahead and try them. It's better to try them and get them wrong than it is to just sit there and wait. So on this one, your variables are already on the same side. Now they're not always going to be beside each other. Sometimes the plus 5 might be in the middle. It's still the exact same. If they're on the same side of the equation, then you can just simply combine them. So 7x minus 3x, so this time we're going to be subtracting. Bring down your positive 5, your equals in your 29, and then you should know how to finish it by now. So that's really just the only new step that you learned was combining those variables. So you should have subtracted 5. 4x is 24. Divide by 4. X equals 6. Now in this one, you've got two variables, one on each side of the equation. Again, I would move the smaller one. If you move the bigger one, it's going to be a different, the problem is going to be work different, but you'll still end up with the same answer. So since that's positive 3x, we'll subtract 3x. 8x minus 3x is 5x. Bring down your minus 4, your equals, and your 26. Now you should have added 4. 5x equals 30. Divide by 5. X is 6. I'm going to throw some negatives in there to try to confuse you, because that's what the GED is going to do. It's going to try to confuse you. All right, so we get 3 negatives and a positive. Now, it's up to you which one of these you move. Negative 2x or negative 6x. Now remember I said I always move the smaller one? Well, if you know anything about ordering negative numbers, you know that this one is actually smaller than this one. So remember, you've got to think backwards when it's negative. Just because this is 6 and this is 2 doesn't mean that this one's bigger. That's only if they're positive. If they're negative, whichever one is closer to 0 is actually the larger one. Now if you move this, you can still work the problem just fine. But I'm going to choose to move this one over here. So plus 6x plus 6x. Bring down my 10, my equals. Now negative 2 plus 6, you can enter that in your calculator exactly like it's written. Negative 2 plus 6. You'll get 4x, because since they're different signs, we subtract them and then keep the sign of the larger. Bring down my minus 6. Now a lot of people ask me what they can do because they get confused when the variable is on the right hand side, because they get used to working them on the left hand side. If you take this whole side and move it over here and take that whole side and move it over here, it's not going to change anything. You can do that if you want, but you do really need to learn how to work with both sides. So since my variable is on the right side now, I'm going to be getting rid of my 6. A lot of times when people come to that point, they'll think, well, I need to get rid of the 10, and so they'll subtract 10 from both sides, and then they're lost. You always work with the side that's got the variable on it, not the side that's just got a number over there. So last step, divide by 4. X equals 4. Now, if you would have moved the 2x over here, you would have ended up with a negative 4x plus 10. Then you would have had to subtract 10, and you would have had negative 4x equals negative 16. So then you would have divided by -4 on both sides, and you would have still ended up with 4, because -16 divided by -4. But the way I did it, you don't have to deal with as many negatives. Okay, -10x plus 3x plus 8 equals -20. Now, these are on the same side already, so you're just going to be combining them. You've got to get used to which times you move them and which times you just combine them. So in this one, we had to move it because here's the equals and they're on both sides. This time they're already beside each other. So again, if you have a calculator, just punch in -10 plus 3. But if you don't, it's different signs, subtract, keep the sign a little larger. You're going to end up with -7x equals, I almost forgot my plus 8, equals -20. Next step, get rid of your 8. So -20 minus 8 is -28. Divide by your -7. X equals +4. Two negatives make a positive when you're multiplying or dividing. All right, now there's some other multi-step problems, and we covered this in expressions too, so you might remember this. So you can have parentheses in algebraic equations, just like you can expressions. So they're solved exactly the same way as you would with an expression. So you remember, since you can't combine these because that has an x and that doesn't, then you have to distribute, which means the 4 gets multiplied by everything in the parentheses. So 4 times 2x is going to be 8x. 4 times 8, +32, equals 16. Now we're right back to a two-step equation. Subtract your 32. 8x equals -16. Divide by 8. And I'm going kind of quick just for your notes' sake. -2 is your answer. Because I'm just trying to make these videos as short as I can. If you need to stop and pause and replay, that's fine. So let's do a different one. Sometimes you're going to have lots of negatives involved. Say we've got this, -3 parentheses 2x minus 12 parentheses equals -6. So again, same first step. Multiply your -3 times your 2x. So negative times a positive is going to end up being a negative. A negative times a negative, and you do treat that as a negative even though it's -12. We talked about that. So negative times a negative makes this a positive 36. Okay, so get rid of your 36. -42. Divide by your -6. +7. Okay, let's try some on the worksheet. So you've only got one worksheet. It's got 3 pages. I'm only going to go over 2 of them. So these first ones are pretty easy. I'm going to get to one that you might have trouble with. This one right here seems to give people a lot of trouble because when they don't see a number in front of the R, they tend to forget what to do. And I think I covered this in expressions. If you have a variable with no number in front of it, you can always put a 1. That doesn't change anything because 1 times R is still R. So that will allow you to combine 1R plus 8R and get 9R. Now remember I said they don't have to be beside each other, they just have to be on the same side of the equation. So you bring down your plus 11, your 29, and then you should be able to work that to the end. That's just a two-step now. Sometimes you'll end up with problems like this. We haven't covered this. So these are already on the same side. Negative 14 plus 14 is going to be 0. 0 times v is just going to end up being 0. Now if you bring down your equals and your negative 10, that confuses a lot of people because they don't know what to do here, or they think the answer is 0, or they think the answer is negative 10. Well, the answer is not negative 10 or 0, because if you end up losing your variable because they canceled out, you end up with an equation that doesn't make sense. We know that negative 10 is not equal to 0. Now, if this said negative 10 equals negative 10, that would be a different scenario, or 0 equals 0. But we know negative 10 does not equal 0. If you ever get a problem like this, I don't think this ever happens on the GED, but it will happen in algebra classes. So this means no solution. And there might be some others on this page that are worksheet that are no solution. Let's do one of these, number 13. So you just kind of ignore everything from here over. You just work with the parentheses first. So 5 gets multiplied by x. You just end up with 5x. 5 gets multiplied by 6, positive 30. Then you just bring down everything. Negative 3, now you got to have a sign in front of there. So since that was a positive 5x, you got to put plus. Bring down our equals, 37. Now you would combine your like terms. So 30 and negative 3 get combined. So 30 minus 3 is 27. I'm going to put my 5x first, my 27 second. That glare seems like it's getting worse. Equals 37. Now you got a two-step problem. You should be able to finish that on your own. This one tends to confuse a lot of people because it's just got a negative in front of parentheses. Now, all that means is you're going to multiply negative times everything in the parentheses, but if you want to put a negative 1 there to help you, you can. So negative times n is just negative n. Negative times negative 8 is just going to make it a positive 8 equals negative 2. So we subtract our 8. Negative 2 minus negative 8 is negative 10 equals negative n. Now you can't ever end a problem when you have a negative in front of the variable. So there's a quick way to do this, and this is just change the signs of both sides. But if you want a different way, you can always write that 1 in there, and then you can divide by negative 1 if that helps you remember. So n is just going to equal positive 10. Some of these are a little bit more difficult, but just take your time, work through them. I'll work this one, and then that's where we'll stop. So parentheses first, negative 8 times negative 8x is going to be positive 64x. Negative 8 times negative 6 is going to be positive 48. Bring down your other side. Okay, so that's all you should do in the first step. Then you've got variables on both sides. Now this one's negative. Remember, I want to move my negative if I've got a positive. So I'm going to add 6x. Add 6x. So 64 plus 6 will be 70x plus 48 equals negative 22. Now I want to get rid of my 48, so I subtract 48. So continue over here. So 70x equals negative 70. Divide by 70. divided by 70. X is -1. So you've got all the answers. Try through those. If you need to watch the video again, you can. That's the end of the video.